Quando pensamos no futuro do planeta, pensamos num planeta sem futuro. Onde já não conseguimos andar. Onde já não conseguimos respirar. Onde já não conseguimos habitar. Onde já não conseguimos partilhar. Onde já não conseguimos viver. É impossível regressar ao passado e corrigir os nossos erros. Mas se começarmos a agir agora, ainda vamos a tempo. A tempo de andar. A tempo de respirar. A tempo de viver. A tempo de transformar. E a tempo de devolver. Devolver o futuro ao planeta.
Muito boa tarde. Bem-vindos ao grande encontro da Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos. O futuro do planeta. Devolver o futuro ao planeta, como sublinhava este vídeo introdutório. O título, olhando para ele, leva-nos a questionar uma pergunta ou uma afirmação? Uma interrogação sobre o futuro ou sobre o presente? Não é um debate utópico este que nos propomos realizar aqui durante este fim de semana. É um apelo irrevogável, é um apelo urgente sobre a nossa casa comum, o pálido ponto azul de que falava Carl Sagan. O planeta que vimos pela primeira vez do espaço há apenas 51 anos. Esta é a fotografia mais publicada da história. Suponho que muitos saberão disto. E é considerada também a mais influente imagem ecológica de sempre. Porque ela, em primeiro lugar, nos mostra aquilo que nós nunca tínhamos visto, a cores, daí o azul, porque nos devolve a grandiosidade e a fragilidade ao mesmo tempo, e porque nos compromete com aquilo que é, afinal, o nosso lar. A fotografia foi tirada pelo astronauta William Anders, da missão Apollo 8, a primeira missão tripulada que orbitou a Lua. Na véspera de Natal de 1968, quando esta fotografia foi tirada, há uma outra a preto e branco que foi tirada cerca de um minuto antes, mas essa nunca ficou para a história, precisamente porque é a preto e branco, apesar de ser magnífica. Esta ficou por ser a cores e por ser azul, por mostrar a Terra azul. O William Anders disse uma coisa altamente complexa do ponto de vista intelectual e filosófico. É lindo. É o planeta azul, fonte de vida. A única fonte de vida conhecida, de facto, até agora. E é a vida que celebramos este fim de semana. A vida do planeta e a vida de todos os seres. No final, não seremos mais do que isso. Não seremos mais do que a nossa vida. O documentário que retrata a vida de uma senhora extraordinária que está connosco este fim de semana e que vai participar na sessão final, Sylvia Earle, um documentário sobre a sua missão no mundo hoje em dia, do ponto de vista de cidadania e científico, começa com uma frase que eu considerei, perceberão rapidamente porque que eu considerei apropriada e decidi ousar transpô-la para esta circunstância e para este momento, que diz isto com uma pequena adaptação minha. No final, todos regressamos ao mar, a oceanos, na mitologia grega. O rio oceânico da mitologia grega. O fluxo contínuo do tempo, o início e o fim, o pai de todos os seres. Francisco Manuel dos Santos foi o avô de Alexandre Soares dos Santos. O legado, com o nome da família, lembra-nos que a vida pode, afinal, propagar-se por gerações. Não sendo nada mais, na sua imensa complexidade e simplicidade, não sendo nada mais, dizia, nem nada menos, do que palavras e ações, ideias e decisões, liberdade e iniciativa. Sei que Alexandre Soares dos Santos deixou expresso que não queria homenagens, mas sentimos a sua falta. E sei, e não sou seguramente o único, que temos a obrigação de dizer obrigado. A Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos celebra 10 anos ao encontro dos portugueses. É a ideia geral que abraça os 5 debates, os 5 grandes debates que têm vindo a ser organizados desde o início do ano, para assinalar exatamente esta década ao encontro dos portugueses. Uma década de iniciativa e liberdade, de ideias e utopias, de perguntas certas e as respostas possíveis, mas em busca. Este fim de semana, a organização é conjunta da Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos e da Fundação Oceano Azul, também ela instituída por Alexandre Soares dos Santos. E este fim de semana, acredito, promete agitar-nos nas cadeiras cómodas da nossa consciência, do nosso bem-estar pós-revolução industrial, deste momento pós-plástico. Espero que tenham sentido o conforto de entrar neste teatro hoje, pela porta principal, através da ilha de plástico que está ali depositada e que é mesmo para incomodar. Pedimos desculpa, sobretudo, aos sapatos de salto alto. Para as boas-vindas introdutórias deste encontro, aqui a TVI tem o orgulho de se associar uma vez mais. Vou chamar ao palco o Presidente do Conselho de Administração da Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos, Jaime Gama, e o Presidente da Comissão Executiva da Fundação Oceano Azul, Tiago Pitta e Cunha.
Boa tarde a todos, bem-vindos a esta nossa iniciativa no 10º aniversário da Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos. Um ano que nos marcou pela dor da perda do nosso fundador, mas também pelo estímulo do seu legado e da sua mensagem. Conosco, Alexandre Soares dos Santos, sempre presente, para fazer mais, para fazer melhor. Esta iniciativa, este encontro, é realizado em parceria com a Fundação Oceano Azul, que desde há 4 anos tem a concessão por 30 anos do Oceanário de Lisboa. Foram grandes sonhos de Alexandre Soares dos Santos e a iniciativa para a educação que o Nuno Crato lançará até ao final do ano. Um grande legado, um legado de que nos orgulhamos. O tema desta conferência marca também um progresso naquilo que é a agenda da Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos, que se concentrou em temáticas da sociedade, da economia, das instituições e agora avança para temas da governação global, como este da salvaguarda do planeta, das suas condições de habitabilidade, da sobrevivência da biodiversidade, da responsabilidade ecológica. É um tema que desenvolveremos mais à frente em outras iniciativas da Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos, em parceria com a RTP3 no programa Fronteiras 21 e também na nossa próxima conferência em novembro sobre o universo. A responsabilidade da Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos em tratar destes temas de uma forma rigorosa, objetiva e científica é algo de que não abdicamos. Este tema é um tema também que faz recair sobre nós uma responsabilidade que este local também nos recorda quando celebramos os oceanos e agora retomamos esse legado para o programar de uma forma que abranja todos os contributos nacionais e internacionais. Aquilo de que mais nos orgulhamos é que este trabalho que estamos a fazer possa articular-se com aquilo que é o legado dos portugueses enquanto história. O contributo português para o Renascimento, não feito da revisitação dos clássicos gregos ou latinos, mas feitos da incorporação de experiência, da incorporação de conhecimento novo. Muitos dos oradores internacionais que hoje aqui trazemos voltam a percorrer os caminhos de Valentim Fernandes na sua descrição em África, de Pero Vaz de Caminha na América do Sul ou de Fernão Mendes Pinto na Ásia. Explorações, aventura, conhecimento, ampliação de saber. E por isso também nós sentimos como responsabilidade especial, num momento em que, na língua inglesa, na língua espanhola, na língua chinesa, se prossegue, insiste, persiste em declinar a palavra descoberta, nós não consentiremos que a palavra descobrimento seja ou possa ser irradiada da língua portuguesa. Isso nos motiva para prosseguir também esta iniciativa, uma iniciativa fiel ao espírito central do nosso instituidor Alexandre Soares dos Santos, ele mesmo alguém preocupado em ir mais longe, olhar o futuro, ver adiante, abrir novos caminhos, como aqueles que queremos percorrer convosco, os cientistas, os jovens, aqueles que comparecem às nossas iniciativas com o vosso grau de convicção e o vosso sentido de responsabilidade. Muito obrigado.
Bem-vindos a todos ao debate sobre o futuro do planeta. Saúdo a todos os que estão nesta sala, mas saúdo também todos os que nos estão a seguir à distância, os que estão lá em casa também a seguir-nos pela internet. É uma alegria, é uma honra para a Fundação Oceano Azul e para o Oceanário de Lisboa poderem se associar desta maneira aos 10 anos da Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos. Felicito esta fundação na pessoa do Dr. Jaime Gama, que a lidera com a inteligência e a perícia que todos reconhecemos nos muitos anos que liderou os negócios estrangeiros de Portugal. Gostaria também, como o Dr. Jaime Gama, deixar aqui uma palavra de homenagem sentida a Alexandre Soares dos Santos, que com a sua visão prescrutante do futuro e a sua inquietação militante, ofereceu ao país as duas fundações que hoje organizam este debate de ideias sobre o futuro do planeta. Vamos sentir falta da sua capacidade de levar as ideias à prática e de transformar a vontade em ação. Permitam-me outra palavra ainda para José Soares dos Santos, que tem sido o entusiasta na defesa da causa da Fundação Oceano Azul e julgo que posso dizer com ainda mais propriedade também da Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos, desde a hora zero destas fundações. Não me cabe a mim vir dizer nesta sessão de abertura quais são as soluções para o futuro do planeta. Nem o poderia fazer por não as ter. Mas esta conferência de ideias já terá valido a pena se soubermos fazer as perguntas e se soubermos parar para pensar as respostas que são possíveis. Desde logo, em primeiro lugar, devo assinalar o significado de estarmos aqui a discutir o futuro do planeta. Como é que isto é possível? Há 2 ou 3 décadas seria impensável. Seria como discutir a existência do Sol. 30 anos após o anúncio do fim da história por Francis Fukuyama, percebemos que o verdadeiro fim da história pode ser a viabilidade da espécie humana no planeta. Há um ano, o painel intergovernamental de cientistas sobre alterações climáticas publicou um relatório em que declara termos 10 anos para viabilizar ou para inviabilizar o cenário mais favorável de apenas aumentarmos a temperatura atmosférica em 1,5 graus Celsius no final do século. É uma janela de oportunidade, mas é uma janela de oportunidade que é estreita. São apenas 10 anos. Iremos a tempo? Iremos conseguir? Certo é que será necessário um esforço extraordinário de mobilização que abra caminho a mudanças. Será necessário alterar políticas, alterar leis, comportamentos, hábitos, consumos, alterar o nosso estilo de vida e até procurar novos valores. E as perguntas chegam-nos às catadupas, pois discutir o futuro do planeta é questionar-nos a nós mesmos. Como chegámos até aqui? Como não nos apercebemos antes? O problema que criámos com a alteração dos sistemas de suporte do planeta, os oceanos, a atmosfera, as florestas, pode ser resolvido? Estará sob controle? Teremos a tecnologia para o resolver? Podemos diminuir a temperatura das águas, dos mares e dos oceanos? Podemos ainda salvar os recifes de coral e 1/3 da biodiversidade marinha do nosso planeta que depende deles para viver? Poderemos remover o plástico do mar? Ou, mais profundo e mais importante ainda, será que chegámos aqui não apenas pelo que fizemos e continuamos a fazer, mas até e mesmo pelo que somos? Será que a nossa natureza, a natureza humana, é uma implicação, é um dos dados do problema? Seremos uma espécie de superpredadores ou de predadores em série, não compatível com as outras espécies? Estas perguntas abrem a porta a uma reflexão de natureza ontológica sobre o ser que somos. Se formos otimistas, rejeitaremos ter chegado aqui pelo que somos. Rejeitaremos uma visão fatalista, determinista da nossa espécie e da nossa história. Mas o que é claro é que o desafio é formidável e exige estabelecermos uma nova relação com a natureza e com o planeta, uma relação de muito mais respeito. E isso passa por nos interrogarmos sobre o nosso modelo de desenvolvimento económico que exige na sua essência sempre mais e mais recursos naturais. Passa até por pensarmos em revisitar os principais institutos da nossa civilização. O direito, onde a natureza é apenas coisa como era nos tempos da sua abundância, nos tempos idos do Império e do direito romano. A economia, onde a natureza não conta, não é monetizada e logo não tem valor nas análises de custo-benefício. A própria ética, que valoriza a alteridade humana, mas não valoriza suficientemente a nossa relação com as outras espécies. Estas são algumas das perguntas que nos podem inquietar e que esta conferência, certamente de uma maneira ou de outra, não deixará de abordar ao longo dos 2 dias deste fim de semana. Obrigado por terem vindo, obrigado por participarem, muito obrigado por se importarem.
Muito obrigado. Ao longo de... Há aqui uma pequena rampa dissimulada que de vez em quando me leva a um pequeno tropeção. Espero que não seja mais do que isso. Ao longo da minha vida profissional, tenho tentado encontrar taglines, umas mensagens finais para encerrar os noticiários que tenho vindo a apresentar, que de alguma forma correspondam à estratégia editorial que é desenvolvida num determinado momento e que façam uma leitura do tempo histórico que vivemos. Digo isto porque durante vários anos encerrei o telejornal da RTP1 com a expressão é este o nosso mundo, boa noite e até amanhã. Tão simples, mas, reflito agora, também tão ilusório, tão simplista, na verdade. E quando não houver amanhã, o até amanhã deixa de fazer qualquer sentido. É uma certeza como aquela da água, que só sentimos a falta dela quando abrimos a torneira e afinal percebemos que é extraordinariamente difícil e penoso não ter acesso à água. É este o nosso mundo. Mas qual mundo? Qual nosso? O mundo é feito de milhões de mundos. Cada um de nós é feito de muitos mundos diferentes. E é esta a lógica do universo terrestre. O mesmo conhecimento científico que nos tem revelado, ainda que lentamente, mas de uma forma certa, que é este, o funcionamento do universo, é o mesmo conhecimento científico que nos diz, de uma forma inequívoca, que nós estamos a matar os nossos mundos. A Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos e a Fundação Oceano Azul consideraram que não seria possível dedicar 2 dias de debate sobre o que podemos fazer para salvar o mundo, sem termos uma outra noção de que um mundo é, afinal, composto de muitos mundos. E é esse o papel do nosso primeiro orador. Um homem que não conhece apenas as grandes metrópoles do mundo ocidental, mas que sabe o que são os cânticos da chuva indígenas, que conhece a aridez magnífica da Terra do Fogo e a imensa vida da estepe, de origem francesa, filho de mãe italiana e pai canadiano, foi professor no Uganda, em Singapura, no Malawi, em Inglaterra. Acabei de saber que esteve há poucos meses em Mozambique, ali atrás do palco. Viajou, observou e escreveu. Escreveu O Velho Expresso da Patagónia, Comboio Fantasma para o Oriente, Sul Profundo, O Grande Bazar Ferroviário. Chamou ao palco o professor, escritor e ser humano, Paul Theroux, para nos falar do grande bazar do mundo. Welcome.
Thank you. Senhoras e senhores, muito obrigado pela vossa amável recepção. Agradeço também à Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos o convite para este auspicioso evento. É um prazer revisitar Lisboa, a vossa antiga e linda cidade. Eu passei aqui a minha lua de mel sob o encanto do fado. A minha primeira lua de mel. Seguisse outro casamento e outra lua de mel. De qualquer modo, estou feliz por estar de volta. E assim, prossigo na minha língua nativa. Titolo Memorias do futuro. Los recuerdos del porvenir en español. Thank you very much. Okay, you understood that, huh? So my subject is memories of the future, or this one, the Bazaar of the World. You're here for a reason, and the reason is we're wondering about the future. That is the worry, the anxiety of everyone on this planet, every human being. What's going to happen to us? What will become of us? What's going to happen? What will the world be like? What's in store for us? And this condition has a name, chronophobia. Chronophobia. Fear of time passing. What's going to happen? You all feel this anxiety. And for this reason, the wish to know the future, a whole occupation has arisen. The soothsayer, the witch doctor, the haruspex. The haruspex is a Greek person who opens the entrail cuts a bird open and looks at his entrails, his guts, and tries to tell the future. When I lived in Africa, I lived in Malawi. Maybe some of you have been to Africa and maybe to Malawi or to Mozambique. Malawi is right next to Mozambique. The most important person in the country was not the prime minister, not the president. It was the local witch doctor. Why? Because he could tell the future. He had the power of prophecy. In the Bible is full of prophets. So the most respected person in any society is the person who can see the future. This is why, in Macbeth, Shakespeare's Macbeth, Banquo says, if you can look into the seeds of time and say which grain will grow and which will not, speak to me then, who neither beg nor fear your favors nor your hate. So look at these seeds. Which one will grow? Who is he asking? He's asking the witches. So I tend to think that one of the ways that we can have a hint of the future is perhaps through travel, the way I've lived my life. People sometimes say to me, I've been to Bhutan, I've been to Nepal, I've been to China, I've been to Machu Picchu, I've been to the Algarve, I've been to Porto, I've been to Sevilla, I've been to India. And I say, I've been to a place you have never been and will never go. It's called the past. The past. The past is another country. People do things differently there. And you can't go there. But I've been there. So when I think age is a help. But also the way travel itself, not official travel, not travel on the red carpet, but travel in the old, laborious, difficult way, by land. I once went from Cairo to Cape Town. I went by land. I went down the Nile, then through the Sudan, then through Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, through Zambia, Malawi, Zimbabwe, then Mozambique, and down Johannesburg to Cape Town. I never took a plane. And I learned a lot. I never met an important person, but I met many people. I started my life as a teacher in Africa and in Malawi. It was called Nyasaland then. And when I was 22 years old. I stayed there for 2 years and then another 4 years in Uganda, and I've gone back repeatedly. Very early, when I was a teacher, I said to the class, what would you like to do when you grow up, when you're much older? What would you like to do? And they'd say, I want to be president. I want to be a politician. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a nurse. I want to be a teacher. I thought, this is great. That was in 1964. The country became independent in July '64. And after when I went back to take my trip from Cairo to Cape Town, I went back in the same classroom and asked the same question. What would you like to do? What would you like to do? I went back to my old school. What did they say? I want to leave. I want to go to America. I want to go to Europe. I want to go to Portugal. I want to go to Australia. Get me out of here. Different. It had been 30 years. So there's so many unexpected features that I had come across. 60 years of adulthood. So I was talking about the past. What are the main differences? Of course, you all know what the differences are. Rise in population, scarcity of drinking water, the disparity between rich people and poor people, the erosion of press freedom, the disparagement of journalists, Donald Trump talks about fake news. But no dictator likes a free press. They disparage journalists. So that's something that's come. If you travel in India and you talk to an Indian who's read the Sanskrit, you'll say, what's going to happen to us? And he'll say, what's coming is the Kal Yuga, the black age, the age of darkness. That's coming. In Indian scriptures, the next age is the dark age, Kal Yuga, Kal Yuga. So when I lived in Malawi, that was in the years of Salazar, and Mozambique, I lived right on the border. So I went back and forth to a place called Vila Cabral. And I went back and forth, I drank the wine, Vino Verde, lovely, and I talked to people there. And if I talked to a Portuguese colonial, a settler there, I'd say, why did you come? And they would say, I came because my village in Portugal has no electricity. But here in Vila Cabral, we have electricity. How long are you staying? Forever, for the rest of my life. Any settler in Mozambique. So what happened? Well, you know what happened. In 1974, I mean, the world changed. And forever changed. So there was a war in Mozambique and Angola, and what looked like we're here forever didn't happen. So one of the great lessons of travel is becoming acquainted with the reality of change and unexpectedness. So even now, if you go to Angola, you won't find many Portuguese there. What will you find as colonial? Chinese. The Chinese in Angola, Chinese in Mozambique, Chinese settlers. Chinese who left to start a new life, small business, competing with Angolans or Mozambicans, and they leaving China. What does that say? Well, when you see a Chinese settler in Africa, that tells you a lot about conditions in China. So looking at a Chinese settler, you begin to understand life in China. In 1973, I was in Vietnam. I was in Vietnam during the war. I was a journalist in Vietnam. And it looked like it was going on forever. It looked terrible. Okay, in terms of the future, even Americans said the domino theory that one country was going to become a communist and it's the end for us. Actually, if you go to Vietnam today, some of you have been there, you'll see Vietnam after the war is a flourishing place. It's busy, it's profitable, they're self-sufficient in food. No one expected that. No one expected that. The Americans thought, we're going to destroy North Vietnam's government, we're going to take over, and we're going to make it a capitalist society. Actually, it sustained itself as a socialist society, but with great capitalistic instincts. They're great manufacturers. So we were wrong. We were completely wrong about that. I went to China, down the Yangtze River, 1980. What I saw looked like the highest stage of poverty in China. Dirt roads, no private cars, factories, very old-fashioned factories. This is 1980. I stopped Wuhan, Hangzhou, Suzhou, all the way down from Chongqing to Shanghai. It looked so strange, but there were still Maoist slogans: defeat the imperialists, defeat the running dogs. I said to an American on this trip, so what's going to happen here? He said, I have no idea. He said, I don't know. But he said an interesting thing. He said, with these a factory that makes cannons or guns or tractors can also be retooled. It can make cars. So he said, we'll see what happens. But I said, the country is so poor and so suppressed. Everyone was wearing a blue suit. Well, anyway, I don't have to beat a dead horse, but if you go to China today, that's not the case. No one expected that to happen. On my way to China, I stopped in Germany. I took the train to China. I stopped in Germany, in Berlin. I said to a German friend of mine, this Berlin is so strange. So you have East Berlin and West Berlin, and Berlin is in East Germany. It's absurd. He said, I know. I said, how do you live with it? He said, well, we live with it. I said, will it ever change? He said, I have no idea. That was in 1986. What happened? 3 years later, the whole thing changed. Everything changed. In 1989. I was in the Pacific in, this would have been 1989-90, in the Solomon Islands. In the Solomon Islands, there's a bird called the megapode bird. The megapode lays eggs in volcanic soil, and the eggs hatch in the sand, because the sand is very warm. And they harvest the eggs. So I went with the chief. I said, this is interesting. You get the bird lays the eggs, and you dig up the eggs, and you eat them. He said, yeah, it's wonderful. So many eggs. I said, but if you dig up all the eggs, what will happen to the birds? He said, there's plenty of birds. I said, why don't you set aside 1 month and let the birds hatch? He said, that's a good idea. But he didn't do it. So if you go there, it's called Savo Island. It's near Guadalcanal. If you go there now, there's no megapode birds. Or let's say there's a couple. But in whatever that is, 17 years, the birds have been eliminated, more or less, from Savo Island. Did they expect that? No, they didn't. You know who Jack London is? Jack London, Call of the Wild, the Yukon, White Fang, To Build a Fire. Jack London was a great traveler. He traveled in England, he traveled in Alaska, he traveled in the Pacific, he was in Mexico, he was in Russia. Jack London also was in Hawaii. I live in Hawaii half the year. So one day, Jack London, in 1916, Jack London and his wife were on the beach in Honolulu. And they were staying in a little boarding house on the beach. And he said to his wife, his exact words, "I'm glad we're here now." And his wife said, "What a strange thing to say. You're glad you're here now. Why?" He said, "Because someday this will be one big hotel from here to there. Hotels." She said, "Really? If you go to Honolulu now, you'll see one long hotel." He had traveled a lot, and it's interesting that he said that. Because he had traveled, he saw how things changed. You know, Jack London died when he was 40 years old. He said that when he was 38. But what his prediction in 1916, 100 years later, came true. So there is such a, I began by saying prophets. There is such a thing as prophecy, but there is an aspect of prophecy which is possible to seize if you look carefully. Do you know a writer called James Agee? James Agee wrote a book called Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, an American author. I'm going to read his quotation. He said, "For in the immediate world, everything is to be discerned for him who can discern it, and centrally and simply, without either dissection into science or digression into art, but with the whole consciousness seeking to perceive it as it stands, so that the aspect of a street in sunlight can roar in the heart of itself as a symphony, perhaps as no symphony can. And all of consciousness is shifted from the imagined to the effort to perceive simply the cruel radiance of what is. Perceiving the cruel radiance, radiating, of what is." A Zen scholar, D.T. Suzuki, said, "What is the nature of freedom. How can we be free? And he said, to see things as they are. To see things as they are. Not as you want them to be, not as the government tells you they are, but to see things as they are. Not from the red carpet, but, as I said, the old, laborious, overland way. To see things as they are. When I was in China in 1986 and 87, there was a lot of disruption and in the rural areas. And the democracy movement was very strong in the rural areas of China, the small cities. So I wrote a book called Riding the Iron Rooster, and it was about I took every train in China. And by the way, you know that the longest railway journey you can make is from here, Lisbon, to Hong Kong. You have to go to Paris, then Berlin, then Warsaw, Moscow to Irkutsk, then to Mongolia, then to Datong, then to Beijing, then to Shanghai, then down, Guangdong, Hong Kong. That should be on your bucket list. It's the longest railway journey in the world. Anyway, I wrote the book, and I mentioned the discontent in rural China. When my book was published in 1988, the reviews for the book were very bad, or they're very mixed, actually, saying, I don't know what I'm talking about. China is reforming. It's great. They're making toys. They make shoes. They make everything, manufacturing, and it's liberalizing, and the people are happy. And my book was seen as negative. But it wasn't negative. It wasn't positive. It was seeing things, the cruel radiance of what is, seeing things as they are. So when 1980, I got bad reviews, but one cure for bad reviews is good sales. So the book sold very well. So I was happy about that. That was 1988. And people were saying, I don't know what I'm talking about. What happened in 1989? Tiananmen. The Tiananmen, and how many people were massacred? You don't even know how many people were massacred. Maybe hundreds, maybe thousands, no one knows. You know, you know who Mao Zedong is? Mao Zedong was a monster, was a tyrant, but now and then he said something that was true. And what he said was, all genuine knowledge originates in direct experience. That's the experience of travel. When I say I was been to a place, the past, is the direct experience of the past can inform the future. When I was in Africa, I became friendly with the writer V.S. Naipaul. You know who V.S. Naipaul is. He won the Nobel Prize in 90, I think he won it in 91 or 92. But he was a good friend of mine. I wrote a book about him that came out about 96 or 7, I think. And I was 24 then, he was 34. And he was very critical of what was happening in Africa. Particularly, he said, the Indians in Africa have no future. I said, actually, they have shops, they have money, they seem to have a basis for relating to Africans. They also spoke Swahili, and when I was in Malawi, they spoke Chichewa. Muma ndimadziwa Chichewa. Mukudziwa? Ukaipa nkopet ziwa nyimbo. That's if your face is ugly, learn to sing. So I could understand. And I said, these people could understand. The language that's also spoken in Mozambique, Chichewa, lovely language. Walila mvula, walila matope, they say in Mozambique. If you're asking for rain, you're asking for mud. Naipaul didn't get this at all. I told him this. He said no, and he would see an Indian, and he'd talk to the Indian, and he'd say, after, I said, what did he say? He said, he's a dead man. He's a dead man. And I said, so what do you think's going to happen? He said, they're all going to leave. They'll be chased out. He said, this government's going to get rid of them. And he was right. I had lived there, but it didn't occur to me. I thought The Indians there had come from India. They didn't observe caste. They adapted. A lot of Indians from India learned how to be aliens by living in Africa. The experience of going to a country like that is you begin to understand alienation, and you begin to understand how to live with people. It happened in Angola, it happened in Malawi, it happened in Mozambique and Kenya and elsewhere. Later, Naipaul wrote a book about India called An Area of Darkness. Then he wrote another book about India called India, a Wounded Civilization. Then he wrote another book, India, A Million Mutinies Now. In that book, this last book, this is what I want you to remember from this talk. He said, I believe that the present, accurately seized, foretells the future. I'm going to repeat that. I believe the present, accurately seized, foretells the future. And he felt that in India. I thought, that's a great lesson. I have no idea what's going to happen to the planet. I mean, it's a very strange thing. In 1985, I wrote a novel. It was called Ozone. I actually started in 1984 and 1985. It was a book about the future. And I thought, I want to write a book set in the future, a future that I might live in. So I chose the date 2020. I said, this book, this novel, takes place in the year 2020. It's next year. The novel Ozone was published in 1987. What did I predict of the future then? Well, I predicted that people would live in secure areas with a perimeter, that gated communities. I thought gated communities. I thought so that all cities would have a kind of perimeter. A suburb would have a wall around it, either a notional wall or a real wall. So I thought a gated community. I thought security would be a problem. I thought that immigration, that people from the undeveloped world or underdeveloped world would come, and that they would try to enter the first world, as it were, and that there would be an underclass of aliens. When I say alien, of immigrants, of undocumented or illegal immigrants. I predicted wastelands. One thing I felt was, in a world where there's so much nuclear energy, that there would be a disaster. It hasn't happened, actually. There's been a lot of nuclear accidents, but no gigantic one. Maybe it will happen in the future. It's almost predictable that some sort of nuclear accident will happen. I felt that in the book. But in a small way, I thought that the world would be pretty much the same, but emphatically different in particular ways. Immigration, I thought, would be a problem. Security would be another problem. 9 countries have nuclear weapons. China, France, Russia, the United States, so forth, Israel. They have a lot of them. It's surprising that it hasn't happened. What I hadn't expected, what you can't predict, but it happened, was that New York was attacked. New York City, big, prosperous, wonderful city. The anniversary was just the other day. New York was attacked by planes flying into buildings. Who would have thought that? It was a very strange thing, unpredictable, but then it became possible for people to believe that a city like that could be attacked. I grew up in the 1950s when the US population was 150 million. Now it's 330 million. If you can imagine twice the number of people, you begin to understand how different a place can be. And many people think that natural resources are salvation. For example, Angola has oil, Venezuela has oil, Nigeria has oil. If you're looking for 3 dysfunctional countries, it would be Nigeria, Angola, and Venezuela, particularly Venezuela. When I say dysfunctional, I only mean that the billions, say 75 billion in oil revenue, or 96 billion in the case of Nigeria, you think that's going to enrich a country, but it didn't. In Lubango, in southern Angola, the students have no textbooks in the schools. There's a Chinese shop, okay, that's good, but the roads are very bad. Same thing in Mozambique, same thing in Venezuela. It's a failed state, although they have oil gushing out of the ground. They have plenty. The same is true in Turkmenistan. I was in Turkmenistan, I think it was 2007. They have natural gas in Turkmenistan. But the people in Turkmenistan have the craziest government imaginable. So you need a number of factors, not just natural resource, but wisdom, leadership, a free press. And I would say that the free press, the transparency is one of the most important ones when we think about the future. So based on, well, the Congo is another. What country has more resources than the Congo? They have gold, they have oil, they have silver, they have bauxite, they have diamonds, copper, they have timber, they have everything in the Congo. But the Congo is a nightmare. It's a nightmare. They have no roads in the Congo. It's totally dysfunctional. There is a government, but it doesn't function in all the areas. So they have all the resources, but they need, obviously, leadership, unity, and some sort of fairness. So we come back to prophecy. The traveler can be a prophet, and prophecy is a wonderful thing, but it varies between scientific observation and just a party trick, like reading your palm. The first of 2 considerations is, as Naipaul says, one way of foretelling a future is accurately seizing the present. If the ocean seems to be in trouble now, in slight trouble, if it's not remedied, it's going to get worse, obviously. If a glacier is melting now, it will go on melting unless we take action against it. If there's plastic bottles, like in the lobby, the entrance when you came in, if you see those in the ocean, there's going to be more of them unless we take action against them. So we have to take action, observe it, and then publish it. So we need the freedom to publish it. It's a thrill to be correct in prediction. And I will say there's a whole genre of fiction about the future. There are even Portuguese novels set in the year 2040 or the year 3000. I made a note of them. 1984 is a novel about the future, a bit like mine. 1984 was years and years ago, but people still think about 1984 as the future. Why is 1984 the date? Because Orwell wrote it in 1948, when he felt that totalitarianism was taking over the world, and that governments, totalitarian governments, were mendacious. They were lying to people. So, did it happen in 1984? 1984, most of you lived through it. Did it happen? No, it didn't happen. But what did happen? Not the government, not the way the society was predicted by Orwell, but a way of thinking has happened. When Donald Trump attacks the press and says the press is lying, that's 1984. That's Orwellian. Newspapers lie to you. The government, newspapers lie to you. Fake news. Journalists are the enemies of the people. Journalists are the enemies. That's Orwell. So, people not dressing like 1984, it's not the aspects of the society that he described is not the case. But the thinking, the thinking that he predicted, which is, as in the German prison camp, work makes you free. Arbeit macht frei. Work, that's an Orwellian sentiment. So the sense of prophecy that we see in books about the future, and there are many books written in the 18th and 19th century about going to the moon. The moon was present. There are probably 100 books, 100 novels written from the 16th century to the present about going to the moon. People were obsessed with going to the moon, as though that was going to be a salvation. But people were thinking about novels about going to the moon, the future, for hundreds of years. It's a whole genre. So it's disappointing to be mistaken in a prophecy, our prediction. But I'm a writer, and prophecy is not my business. What is my business is observation, and I suppose experience. The more detached you are in travel, the less you see. People say luxury travel is wonderful, but luxury travel is wonderful, but it shows you nothing. People go on safaris in Africa and have a wonderful time, but the person who lives in a village in Africa, a small village in Africa, for a year or two, knows more about the future of Africa than any red carpet, any official visit, or any safari goer will find. And I found living in an African village taught me a great deal about what was to come. It's much more important to see the world as it is. The condition of the oceans, the condition of the land, the science of climate change, the eradication of species. As I said, I live in Hawaii. We've lost many species of birds in Hawaii over the years for a lot of reasons. One, the introduction of cats. So cats come, people say, oh, it's a little pussy cat, but the pussy cat multiplies, and they've killed the ground-feeding birds. The future, if we have a future, will be based on the freedom to observe. However the future is constituted, the most important thing is to be able to speak the truth, to write it, to disseminate it on the internet, to broadcast it, to publish it, and to have events like this where you are concerned, and I'm concerned, and this foundation sponsors it. We're all concerned. This is important to meet. This is we're like early Christians meeting to discuss what's going to happen. Except it's not a religious revival that we're seeking, but this is like the church contemplating the future, the congregation contemplating the future. The future of the planet depends on the freedom to see things as they are, and to observe and report the truth. So if something good comes out of this event in these few days, it will be the ability to publish the truth and to meet with people of experience who have studied the problem, who've lived long enough to see how the world changes, maybe travelers. Tomorrow, John Kerry, former Senator Kerry, will be here speaking. Our government has many people who talk about war, who talk about conflict, and send soldiers into battle. None of them have been soldiers. John Bolton, former secretary, Donald Trump, Dick Cheney. You know who Dick Cheney is? Dick Cheney was the Secretary of State under George Bush. None of them were soldiers. All of them advocated war. Ask John Kerry tomorrow what he thinks about going to war, and he'll give you a better answer. You know why? Because he was a soldier. He was in Vietnam. He understands the nature of war. Colin Powell, who was also a soldier, was not a warmonger. Who's the best person to judge whether we should go to war? A soldier, someone who has seen war, not someone who had deferments. Trump didn't want to go. He said, I don't want to go. I have a problem with my foot. Dick Cheney had 5 deferments. And by the way, Dick Cheney is my age. He's exactly my age. So we grew up in the same world. And one that I joined the Peace Corps and went to Africa. He went to Washington and became a powerful politician. So I also think this. If we are convinced that we can see the future, that also might be a problem, because we have to keep an open mind. Travelers know that there's no ultimate destination, and the great challenge in travel is the unexpected. The bombing of New York, the attack on New York, the disruption at Tiananmen Square, the failed states of Africa, a country that has a lot of money and a lot of oil that's still poor. That's unexpected. My students in Malawi used to say, if only we had oil, we'd be free, we'd be better. They might have been cursed, they might have been worse off if they'd had it. One of the great satisfactions in travel, you could say one of the great satisfactions in life, is uncertainty, is not being exactly sure, not getting it from the witch doctor, the soothsayer, or the scientist, but being unsure. And why? Because the unexpected, the events that we never thought were going to happen, are those experiences that test our imagination and our adaptability. By not knowing the future, we stay more alert. Do you understand what I'm saying? That we're not sure, so we have to stay vigilant. And our not knowing, but our studying, our continual studying of it, keeps us watchful in our observations, and if they're reported truthfully with a free press, television, and the internet, reported with authenticity and truth, that will keep us strong and help us showing the way forward. Thank you. Okay. So if you have any, are there any questions? I'm not sure how we're going to ask the questions, but if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yes?
I don't have any microphone here, anyway.
You don't have a microphone.
But I can jump closer and make a small question. You talk about free press.
Yes.
How do you see free press? If free press today doesn't have enough financial resources to go ahead.
Okay, here's the question. How can you have a free press if you don't have financial resources? Well, that's a very, very interesting question. And I don't even know the answer to it. But I can say that there's something called the underground press. In the Soviet Union, there was something called samizdat. Samizdat was a way of promoting information and talking about the government and the conditions with very little money. It was just done by word of mouth. It's true that the press is controlled, obviously, by wealth and influence, but the commitment of the press has to be to disseminate truthfully and for people to have access to it. You might say that one answer might be that the internet is not expensive, and that a lot of news that we get is on the internet, and we get it. I must say, the internet also has a lot of misinformation on it. But the press is now evolving from newspapers that people bought and read. The newspaper is probably antiquated, even books. A book now, if I publish a book, it will be will be a book that you read like that. The rest will be a Kindle, electronic, an e-book. E-books are very cheap. How much does it cost to just send a text of a book? So maybe the answer is that the liberation will come through electronic media and not through traditional media. Traditional media is very expensive, other media is not. But I hope, I don't know whether that answers your question. I don't know the answer, but I think that the electronic media requires less money, and if people trust it, if they have faith in it, that may be the way forward. There will come a time, obviously, the New York Times is the magazine is the newspaper of record in the United States. People trust the New York Times. Sometimes they get things wrong, but usually it's a newspaper of record. There'll be a time in the future when the New York Times will not be a paper. It will not be on paper. Possibly in your lifetime, in my lifetime. It won't be a piece of paper. It will be an electronic on a screen. Will that be expensive? No, I don't think so. I think it will be a lot cheaper. So I think it's possible. But it's absolutely essential. It's essential. And so what I'm saying is that if we don't, that the crisis that we're facing is in freedom of the press, freedom of the media, and seeing things. Rather than being told, no, climate change, we have a government to say, there's no problem. Climate change is not a problem. Extinction of the species, not a problem. Clean water, not a problem. Well, all of them, they are problems. So the problem is not with the press, the problem is with government, and then being able to report on that. Any other questions? Yes?
Paul, thank you very much for your talk. It was really, really a great talk, and your words resonate on us, I think, when time passes. You spoke about Malawi in the 60s and how kids had hope and they wanted to become doctors and lawyers, and how nowadays hope has been replaced by despair, and people want to leave the continent. Well, if we look into the United States, probably we can say the same thing in a way, so that today people have, in the United States as well, found the conditions to follow leaderships that seem that something happened from when they were in the 60s to now. So would you say as well that hope has been also replaced by despair in a country like the United States? And if that's so, how will we face the challenge of the future of the planet and sustainability with despair?
Okay, that's a complicated question. The question is how. It's not despair in Malawi. I think in third world countries, in Africa and South America, it's not despair that people are. It's disenchantment, disappointment. Despair, it means, for me, you give up. But disenchantment means, I don't like it here, I'm going there. It's looking for another opportunity. How do you replace it? It's a very difficult question, but one of the reasons why people leave countries to go to more developed countries is the developed countries need their labor. Britain imports nurses from South Africa. The National Health Service in Britain is staffed by South African nurses. Who needs nurses? Britain or South Africa? So South Africa obviously need doctors and nurses, but Britain, I know this as a fact, Britain encourages talented, professional medical people to come, to leave their country. Then what happens? Bill Gates or Apple or wealthy people send nurses to South Africa to work for 2 years. So when I was in Africa, one of the problems was a lack of medical people. It was a serious lack. No dentists, no doctors, no nurses. So they started a medical school in Malawi, in Kenya, in Uganda. And they trained doctors. But none of the doctors stayed. So to have people stay, you not only need to train them, you need to encourage them to believe that they have a future. You have to pay them, obviously. And they need to understand that they have a future in the place where they were trained. I think they have an obligation to stay for a certain period of time as doctors. How do you replace, how do you encourage, the question is there, despair. How do you replace despair with hope? Money, stability, the future. You have to convince people that they have a future and that things will be different. But if the government is a dictatorship, if there's no security, if people want to educate their children, they go to another country. They would come to Portugal, they would go to Britain, they would come to the United States. So it's believing, most people who leave are leaving to enrich their families, their children. I've been traveling for the past 3 years in Mexico. The Mexicans who come to the United States would prefer to stay home with their family, with their food, with their community. They don't want to come to the States and work in a hotel. They would like to stay in their village. And so I traveled all over Mexico, driving my car all over Mexico. And that's what struck me was they don't really want to come to the States, but they have to because they have no money and they have no, they want to educate their children, they want clothes, they want food. They need to because they feel deprived, particularly in Oaxaca. Some of you might have been to Mexico, Oaxaca and Chiapas. The per capita income in Chiapas and Oaxaca, Mexico, is the same as Kenya and Bangladesh. So if they're earning the same amount of money, or the per capita income is the same. Bangladesh and this part of Mexico. If you go to Mexico City, you say, this is great, this looks like Lisbon, this is wonderful. Food is wonderful. But if you go to the hinterland, and this is why I say if you travel and you want to understand a country, cross the border, cross the frontier, go to the hinterland, go to a village. Don't just stay for a little while, stay for a long time in a small village and you'll understand it much better. So I think to understand how despair can be turned into hope, a place, it's not the urban areas that should be studied, but the interior, the heart and soul of a country, rather than its capital city. I told you that the Portuguese migrants who went to Mozambique weren't from Lisbon. They were from small villages in the north. Small villages with no electricity, and they had a well and a bucket. And they just wanted a better life. So the better life was in Africa. I mean, they went in search of a better life. They weren't racist, they weren't imperialists. They were people who were trying to improve their life. And then in 1974, they came back. But they came back to a different country, obviously. I think, unless there's another really urgent question, I want to thank you for being such a lovely and attentive audience. I think this event is very, very important. The idea, this is a big question, the future of the planet. It's the question in the back of everyone's mind. Not what's going to happen tomorrow or next week, but where are we going? How are we going to get there? And will our children be safe? Thank you very much.